Winter has always been a ruthless force in war, an enemy that does not choose sides. As temperatures plunge below freezing and the landscape hardens into ice and snow, survival itself becomes a daily battle. In the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, winter has once again returned to the battlefield, transforming an already brutal war into something even more unforgiving. The cold does not merely slow armies, it exposes weaknesses, tests morale, and magnifies suffering. For soldiers and civilians alike, winter in this war is not just a season, it is a weapon. When the first snow begins to fall across eastern Ukraine, the land changes almost overnight. Roads become slick and impassable, fields freeze solid, and muddy trenches harden into jagged ice pits. What was once a battlefield of movement becomes one of endurance. Soldiers brace themselves against biting winds that cut through layers of clothing, while artillery echoes across frozen plains. The cold settles into bones and minds alike, and every decision becomes a matter of survival as much as strategy. For Ukrainian soldiers defending their homeland, winter brings both hardship and resolve. Many are fighting in trenches dug hastily into frozen ground, where dampness seeps through boots and gloves. Frostbite becomes a constant threat, as dangerous as enemy fire. Nights are the worst. Temperatures drop sharply, and the silence of snow is broken only by distant explosions or the crack of gunfire. Sleep comes in short, uneasy intervals, interrupted by alarms, patrols, or sudden attacks. Yet, despite the cold, morale often remains fueled by the knowledge that they are defending their homes, families, and future. Russian forces face similar physical challenges, but winter has historically been both an ally and an adversary for them. Russia's military doctrine often emphasizes endurance in harsh conditions, drawing on centuries of fighting in cold climates. However, modern warfare demands more than historical resilience. Logistics, supply lines, and equipment maintenance become critical under freezing conditions. Vehicles fail, fuel thickens, and weapons malfunction. Soldiers without proper winter gear suffer immensely, and reports of inadequate supplies have surfaced repeatedly. Hunger, cold, and exhaustion weaken even the most heavily armed units. The winter war reshapes tactics on both sides. Large-scale offensives become harder to execute as mobility decreases. Armoured vehicles struggle in snow-covered terrain, and air operations are hampered by poor visibility and harsh weather. Instead, the fighting often shifts toward artillery duels, drone reconnaissance, and small infantry assaults. Trenches become central once again, evoking images of earlier wars, where soldiers endured months in frozen, miserable conditions. Drones, a defining feature of this conflict, take on a different role in winter. Snow makes movement more visible, revealing footprints, vehicle tracks, and supply routes. A single drone can identify positions that might otherwise remain hidden. At the same time, cold temperatures drain batteries faster, limiting flight times and forcing operators to adapt. Even advanced technology must bow to the realities of winter. Civilians suffer perhaps the most in this deadly season. In towns and villages near the front lines, winter compounds the devastation caused by shelling and occupation. Power grids are damaged or destroyed, leaving homes without electricity during the coldest months of the year. Heating systems fail, water pipes freeze, and access to basic necessities becomes a struggle. Families huddle together in basements or makeshift shelters, burning whatever they can find to stay warm. For the elderly and children, the cold is especially dangerous, turning displacement into a life-threatening ordeal. Cities like Kharkiv, Bakhmut, and others near active fighting zones endure relentless attacks even as snow blankets the streets. The sound of artillery does not fade with winter. It echoes louder across frozen air. Buildings already weakened by earlier strikes collapse under the weight of snow and ice. Emergency responders work in impossible conditions, digging survivors out of rubble while exposed to freezing temperatures and ongoing danger. Winter also intensifies the humanitarian crisis. Supply routes become more difficult to maintain, delaying deliveries of food, medicine and fuel. Aid workers risk their lives navigating icy roads under threat of attack. Refugees fleeing the fighting face perilous journeys, often travelling on foot or in overcrowded vehicles without adequate protection from the cold. For many, the choice is grim: stay and risk freezing or shelling, or flee into uncertainty. Psychologically, winter warfare takes a heavy toll. The darkness comes earlier and lasts longer, draining energy and hope. Soldiers speak of the cold as something that creeps into the mind, dulling emotions and sharpening fear. Isolation deepens as movement becomes restricted, and the endless grey of winter skies mirrors the uncertainty of the war itself. For those on the front lines, each day feels longer, each night colder, each loss heavier. Despite the suffering, winter also brings moments of eerie calm. Snow-covered fields can appear peaceful from a distance, masking the violence beneath. There are brief pauses when fighting slows, when soldiers share hot tea, write messages to loved ones, or simply stare into the white horizon. These moments are fragile and fleeting, often shattered by sudden bombardment. The contrast between the beauty of winter and the brutality of war makes the experience even more haunting. Historically, winter has played a decisive role in conflicts involving Russia, from Napoleon's invasion to World War II. In Ukraine, however, the narrative is different. Winter does not favour one side automatically. Instead, it punishes unpreparedness and rewards resilience. Ukrainian forces have shown adaptability, using winter to fortify defences and exploit Russian logistical weaknesses. At the same time, Russia has attempted to leverage its numerical and artillery advantages, pressing attacks even in harsh conditions. Energy infrastructure becomes a key battlefield during winter. Strikes on power plants, substations and heating facilities aim to break civilian morale by plunging cities into darkness and cold. For Ukraine, defending and repairing this infrastructure becomes a matter of national survival. Engineers work around the clock, often under fire, to restore electricity and heating. The population adapts with generators, candles and communal shelters, turning resilience into a form of resistance. For soldiers in trenches, winter changes the rhythm of life. Food freezes, water turns to ice, and even simple tasks require extra effort. Weapons must be cleaned constantly to prevent malfunctions. Medical care becomes more complicated as wounds heal slower and hypothermia threatens the injured. Evacuating the wounded under fire across icy terrain is a race against time, where minutes can mean the difference between life and death. The deadly nature of winter war is not always visible in statistics. Frostbite, illness and exhaustion claim lives quietly, away from headlines. A soldier who loses fingers or toes to frostbite may survive the war, but carry its scars forever. The cold leaves marks that are both physical and psychological, reminders of a season when survival itself was uncertain. As winter deepens, the war enters a phase of attrition. Gains are measured in meters rather than kilometers. Each fortified position becomes a symbol of stubborn resistance. The frozen ground absorbs blood and shrapnel, bearing silent witness to countless battles. Cemeteries expand even as the earth becomes too hard to dig, forcing communities to find new ways to mourn and remember. International attention does not wane in winter, but the world's gaze can feel distant to those shivering in trenches or dark apartments. Aid continues to flow, but needs grow faster than supplies. Winter clothing, heaters and generators become as vital as weapons. The global response highlights how modern warfare extends beyond the battlefield, demanding humanitarian support on an unprecedented scale. As the season drags on, both sides look towards spring, not as an end to the war, but as a shift in its character. Yet, for many, spring feels impossibly far away. Each day of winter is a test of endurance, a reminder that this war is not only fought with missiles and tanks, but with willpower, resilience, and the ability to endure suffering. The Russia-Ukraine winter war is deadly not just because of the fighting, but because of the cold's relentless pressure on every aspect of life. It strips away illusions of quick victories and exposes the true cost of conflict. In frozen trenches and shattered cities, winter demands payment in pain, patience, and lives. When history looks back on this conflict, winter will stand out as one of its most merciless chapters. A season where nature joined the battlefield, indifferent to flags or ideologies, testing the limits of human endurance. For Ukraine, surviving the winter is an act of defiance. For Russia, enduring it is a challenge that reveals cracks beneath military power. And for the world, it is a stark reminder that war, when combined with winter, becomes something even more unforgiving. As snow continues to fall and the wind howls across the plains, the war does not pause. It grinds on, cold and relentless, leaving behind frozen scars on land and people alike. In this deadly winter war, survival itself becomes a form of victory, and each dawn breaking over the frozen battlefield is a quiet testament to those who endure another day.